What's up guys, Jeff Cavalier, ATHLEAN-X.com. So today we're going to talk about nutrition and hopefully simplifying nutrition because I know how difficult it can be for many, right? This is the part that trips up a lot of people regardless of how consistent you can be with your workouts. And the fact is, when it comes to nutrition, guys, I actually think we spend a lot of time doing things that we don't necessarily need to do, that they don't just overcomplicate the process, but they make it more monotonous and more likely to be abandoned. And one of those things is counting calories. I don't think you necessarily have to spend all your time putting in your data into apps and measuring and counting when there's a way we can do this visually that's a lot easier and at least a lot more likely to be adopted for the long term and be done consistently. And that is an approach I want to share with you because I actually do the same thing, and it involves a couple clocks, all right? And that is, we look at two key positions on the clock. 9 o'clock, right here, and by the way, this has nothing to do with the specific time you're supposed to be eating. But remember the 9 o'clock position here and 9:20. If you can remember those two positions there, you're well on your way to making your life a hell of a lot easier, all right? And why is that? Because you take that same thing and you apply it to the plate you're going to eat from. You simply think visually in your head. You don't have to draw this, guys. You visually think this. 9 o'clock and 9:20, right? We basically divided up our plate. And remember, when we're talking about any type of approach to try to lose weight, you're manipulating calories in some way, right? And this is an attempt to sort of manipulate some portion sizes via this visual approach that's so much more simple than having to measure things out. And you're going to see it in action here. So we take the largest portion of these three areas here, and this is where we want to put our fibrous carbohydrates. And to simplify this, guys, I'm going to actually make a whole list of the fibrous carbohydrates, the more popular fibrous carbohydrate sources and choices on our website, and make it available at the link below this video in the description. It's ATHLEAN-X.com/carbs. But we're talking about the vegetables over here, okay? Now we have our fibrous carbohydrates. And the second largest portion of your plate, I want you to put in your protein. And I don't care if you are following a vegan or a vegetarian diet. If that's your plan there, your protein would be different choices here. You might have tofu or lentils or quinoa. There's different choices, but it doesn't negate the fact that this is going to work. And while we're on that same line of thought, guys, you're going to find, again, some carbohydrates on this plate. I know that there's a lot of people that don't want to include carbohydrates in what they eat. They want to do it in a very low amount if they're following a ketogenic diet plan. Guys, I don't have a problem if your diet plan is something you can follow consistently. If that's not happening here, you might want to open your eyes to maybe a different approach. If you're able to stick to something long-term, then that's all that matters to me, finding a long-term solution. I happen to think that as a hard training athlete, that carbohydrates are a very important thing to my life and to me to maintain my performance. So I include them in what I eat. And again, if you include it in yours, you're going to find this really helpful. If not, you don't have to watch the rest of this. But in the remaining portion of the plate here is where I put my starchy carbohydrates. And these are your rices and pastas and potatoes, right? Now, what is different about this? A lot of times what people do is they tend to have a plate that looks like this instead. Starchy carbohydrates all over the plate, right? Big starchy carbohydrates, lots of pasta, and maybe they throw some chicken on top, and maybe some vegetables sprinkled in. That's a much different looking plate than what I just laid out. And the problem is that I actually have some issues with carbohydrates. You want to know what they are? Two of them. Number one, they're the most satisfying. And number two, they're the least satiating. That's a deadly combination. Because when something's incredibly satisfying, we tend to like our carbohydrates more than any other element when it comes to eating our foods, right? They're the most satisfying. But they're also the type that you can eat a lot and a lot and a lot and a lot of before you feel satiated or full. That's kind of a double whammy. So if we do what I said here and we do this division of the plate, protein, fibrous, and starchy, then what we've done is we've actually controlled a lot of what our intake is going to be. And what we want to do is we want to not just look at our plate from above, top down, but we also kind of get a little bit more attuned to what's happening to our plate when we kind of look at it from over here. Because it doesn't give you license, just because you're dividing the plate up the way I'm showing you here, to mound this food all the way out in 3D right into your living room. You want to have some responsibility. I'm going to show you how I do this and apply this to myself. But when you do this, guys, you're actually controlling it because we know that the most calorically dense foods that are ever going to be on your plate are going to be here in the starchy carbohydrates, right? So you're talking about wanting to eat the most of the most calorically dense foods. That is where people trip up with carbohydrates. It's not that there's something wrong with the carbohydrates themselves necessarily. It's the fact that people tend to eat them in excess a lot. So if we can occupy more space with fibrous carbohydrates, which are far less calorically dense, and then we can occupy a good amount of space with our protein, which doesn't tend to be that satisfying, believe it or not. Protein foods, if I gave you the option to eat 10 chicken breasts, you probably wouldn't really want to take me up on it. It's not that appetizing. But it does serve a very important role in our nutrition plan, especially as hard training athletes. And in the same time, it does actually fill you up and provide a large portion of this plate that is not starchy carbohydrate based. So we can see where we're going here. So if you do this, I promise you guys, you're going to not have to necessarily worry so much about the minutia. Because if you just give this a try and adopt this over the course of a week, I bet you start to see some results, and the simplification of the process is going to make it something you could actually stick to. Now, if you want to reinforce it with some calorie counting, guys, I'm not telling you can't do that, but I do think that the longer you stay hooked to those apps and the longer you stay hooked to the whole process of doing that, you're actually becoming a slave to the entire process when it doesn't have to be. I have not counted the calorie now in 30 years, 20 or 30 years. I'm not a slave to the process. I know what I'm putting in my body visually just by looking at this and kind of following the same guideline. So while we're on that point, what does my plate look like? Well, this is what my plate looks like. You're going to see one stark difference here. On my plate, you can see from the mounting, I have that under control. I'm not building this thing up like a tower, like this. Instead, what I've done differently is I've just changed the proportions here of my fibrous to starchy carbohydrates. For me, again, as a hard training athlete, what I do is I find that my body responds much better to the starchy carbohydrates, to fuel my workouts, to fill my muscles, to make me look better and perform better. So what I do is I actually just make this the starchy portion. This is still my protein, and this is my fibrous carbohydrates. And you can see on my plate here, on this particular night, I have my edamame in here for my fibrous carbohydrates. I had 2 portions of the starchy carbohydrates. I have my beloved sweet potatoes, second only to carrot cake, believe it or not. I do like them a lot. And that's a key, guys. You do have to like what you're eating. This is not about picking choices here that you don't like. You'll never be able to stick to anything if you're doing that. You need to find foods that you like that fit this equation. But I have my pasta portion and I have my sweet potatoes that occupy twice as much space. Again, this works for me. I've been lean now for a long period of time. This is how I eat. If this didn't work for you, if you tried this and it wasn't working for you, the first thing you'd do is you'd switch these up to go to the smaller portion, which is what I recommended in the beginning of the video for those looking to lose weight. But I wouldn't sacrifice my protein portion over here. So guys, I hope that you can just at least try this. It's a very simplified approach, I get it. But a lot of times, simple is what works. And simple is what gets adopted long term. And dietary consistency revolves around simplicity. And this is something I want you guys to try. If you're looking for a step-by-step plan, guys, we include our nutrition plan with all of our programs. It's the X Factor meal plan. And I'll show you not just how some of these strategies, but I'll give you more of the list of foods to do. And guys, as I mentioned, you want to find a list of the carbohydrates. We have them over at ATHLEAN-X.com/carbs. I put together a free list of the fibrous and starchy options so you can kind of peruse those and see what fits your taste the best so you can fill out your plate better. In the meantime, if you found the video helpful, make sure you leave your comments and thumbs up below. Let me know what you want me to cover. I'll do my best to do that for you. In the meantime, if you haven't already done so, guys, make sure you click subscribe and turn your notifications so you never miss a video when we put one out. All right, guys, I'll see you soon.